to the vistas of power and purpose that God gave man in the beginning, you heard some reference was made today about the dominion mandate. This was God's plan. If I had time, I would have given you a stage analogy, but stay with me. God gave man an immediate garden. That was his current place. That was his playground. The garden represented everything that was available to him at the time. But don't forget, he also gave him a dominion mandate. That was a description of his future. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the whole earth, put the whole earth under, subdue it, and then have dominion. To the one that he promised such a great future, he gave him a garden. So the garden was his present. The dominion mandate was the future of the garden if he continued in the way of the Lord. Are you there? That's why he said, be fruitful, because he's speaking to a gardener. A gardener is a master of the way of seeds. So he's saying, this garden is not supposed to be your end. This garden is supposed to be your nursery bed to learn how to take the whole earth. If you do well with this garden will develop around you until from it you will develop power to overcome and overtake everything in the earth. So it was a starting point. That intimacy was his introduction to eventual dominion. Between what he was currently given, a garden, to dress it, to guard it, to keep it, and the promise that was given to him that his obedience will one day lead to global billion flow dominion, he was anointed as an interpreter. That's why you notice that the moment man landed on the scene of the garden, the first thing was asked to do was to name all the animals. The naming of the animals was an interpretation test. It meant God made them, but did not confer identity to them. He locked their identity. You heard about codes today, and came to check if the utterances that man makes, the names he calls them, are in sync with the things that are in the heart of God when he made them. That is the job of an accurate interpreter. He looks at it and he can tell, he can interpret it by his DNA, by his physique. This has to be what was in the mind of God when he builds this thing. So he was giving a garden, he was promised a future of dominion, but all his tests were interpretation tests. He was tested with interpreting the purposes of all animals. Then he was put to sleep. When he woke up again, he was asked to interpret the meaning and the value and the structure of the woman that God had taken from his rib. And when he stood before her, he said, this is bone of my bone, this is flesh of, that's interpretation. She shall be called, he gave her a name, said she shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. God had completed his own interpretation tests, but the devil came back again and started his own interpretation test. Listen to me, interpreters of times and seasons, God will test you, the devil will too. This is where it all starts from. Look at the conversation between Eve and the serpent. It was not a conversation of true or lie. It was a conversation of interpretation. God said, did God really say? Which means, what is the correct? All of mankind fell, not because of what was wrong, but because of what was misinterpreted. So the connection between your current garden that God has given you and the future that he has spoken about you is proper interpretation.